Welcome to the Top Agent Happy Hour podcast, where you'll learn how to build a real estate career worth celebrating. Join us as real estate's top producers, industry insiders, and team leaders pull back the curtain, sharing secrets and actionable ideas for attracting clients, delivering great service, and closing deals. You'll also go beyond the deal, learning how to connect with your why, be authentically awesome, and build your will to win. And now let's join your real estate rock star hosts from Pearson Smith Realty, Richard Bridges and Dustin Fox.
All right, guys, thank you for tuning in again for another exciting episode of the Top Agent Happy Hour, where we get together, we riff about different topics, have guests on the show, and today we have an incredibly valuable episode. You guys are going to really enjoy listening to it. We are going to be discussing the 6 books that made Dustin and my careers what they are, which we leaned on and we recommend to anybody and everybody that will listen. And we're going to do 3 apiece. So we have come prepared with our book reports in hand, and we hope you guys are ready to listen as we kick this thing off. Dustin, what do you got for us?
All right. So mine's, I know we both have different styles. You're very big on what I'm just guessing what you're going to come. We don't really know what each other are going to be presenting. But for me personally, I want something very actionable, and these books are actually sequential. So when I read my 3, we're going to leave in the show notes Amazon links for any of these books so you guys can get them later. It'll be really easily attainable for you guys. My first book, it's a sequential. So I want you guys to read these in order, and I promise you, if you do, it's going to change your business. So the first thing, we are all salesmen in real estate. So to be a good salesman, you have to really understand the psychology of sales. So my first book is Influence, and it's by Dr. Robert Cialdini. I think I'm not butchering that name. And it's the psychology of persuasion. So Rich, you and I have talked about this book previously a little bit. He goes into kind of like 4 or 5 or 6 core persuasion methods that can help you in your sales business, or be aware when somebody is selling you on something. The first rule that they present is called reciprocity. And most people, I think, know what that word is. If someone does you a favor and we feel obligated socially to pay back the favor in return, like a psychological burden. And this is partially because as a society, we are disdainful for those that do not reciprocate in return. So for a perfect example, they've done multiple studies on this. They sent out Christmas cards out to complete strangers. And I don't remember the exact number, if it was half or a quarter of the people that received a Christmas card from a complete stranger, they then returned a Christmas card back to them. That's how powerful reciprocity is.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I remember reading that in this book and thinking to myself how absolutely absurd it is, but that we are wired certain ways. And there are certain people who are like, it's like an itch that I have to scratch. I can't leave them hanging, right? Like if someone, I loved it because reciprocity, like I used to walk around my office like this, and people would be like, we aren't celebrating anything, but I will high five them because I can't know that I'm leaving them hanging, right? Like I gotta put my hand on his, we gotta touch skin, and we gotta connect the loop. So the reciprocity works in the story that I give, or the way that I kind of tell people on a very simple level, agents at least that I coach, is that a lot of times they struggle with how do they talk to other people and in a way that doesn't seem salesy, bring up the fact that they're in sales, that they're in real estate. And I go, best way for them to ask you about what you do is to ask them about what they do. It's the law of reciprocity right there. So exactly what you're talking about. It's a very practical application.
So an example for me, kind of growing up, one of my first full-time jobs, I was in a siding warehouse. So I was just like the grunt warehouse manager, but the salesman would always come in, and every time they would come in, they would be like, Dustin, let me get you a Coke. I mean, they weren't even really selling me anything, but it was just so ingrained in their behavior to do small favors. Another great example in the book is, this may be dating myself at 40, because the younger listeners may not know about the Hare Krishnas. They were often lampooned in like the 80s movies for, wearing these toga things and being bald and beating on drums. But they took reciprocity to a whole nother level. They would be at airports, bus stops, and as you were coming off, they would literally walk up to you and hand you a rose. And then after giving it to you, they'd say, would you be willing to make a donation to, to my church? And you would feel psychologically obligated because you were just given something. And the craziest thing about how powerful it was is the people did not obviously want to be carrying a rose around with them while they were traveling. And most of the people would dump the rose in the trash can, and there would be a Hare Krishna there nearby to collect all the roses and then just recycle them into other people. So how do you use this in your business? For me personally, I'm big on, and most of my books are regarding sales letters and actual actionable marketing things. And for you, you don't want to do it from a bad place in a slimy way, like a salesman. But if you are marketing to expired or withdrawals, or you are marketing to anybody, if you give something first, like with your sales letter, like a small gift, without expecting anything in return, your letter is going to automatically have a greater impact than everybody else. It's just like, hey, I want your business. Right. You're being thoughtful. The next rule in the book is scarcity. So we are hardwired to think if there's like a limited time only, or if it's something is in limited supply, it's automatically more valuable. So like banned items and secret information is seen as more desirable. And I use that a lot in my sales letters or my postcards, like 6 secrets every seller should know. And that kind of says like, oh, well, what are these secrets? I want to click on this. And that typically will give me a higher return than just saying, click here for a property valuation. Like you spend all this time chasing your tail, following up with these property valuations, and they're just being curious, like, oh, what's it worth? But if you narrow them down to say like, here's 6 secrets every seller should know, it has more appeal because they're secrets, and it has a little bit more desirability. Also, you can oftentimes in your PS tagline say, or if you're offering a discount for your services, like say you're going 6 to 5% on your listing services, you say for a limited time only, first 2 to respond to this letter or first 2 to do something. It's naturally going to push somebody to reply faster than if there's no deadline at all to get this discount. It's just like hardwired human nature.
Everybody wants to know a secret, right? They all want to know, like, well, what's the juicy gossip, right? And they don't want to feel like they're being left out, right? So they want to be included. So they want to take advantage of those opportunities that are limited. And they also want to just know what's going on. My son, Jack, is a prime example. Like, if I need him to do something, like I will tell my wife a secret in front of him that is like, hey, ask Jack to do the trash. And she'll be like, okay. And then he'll be like, what was it? What did he what did he say to you? Mom, what did he say? Mom, tell me, what did he say? And she'll be like, he wants you to do the trash. And he's like, argh! He gets so mad. And then he does trash, but it's like the secret. He just can't help himself. He's got to know. And that's how people are. Adults are the same way. You don't grow out of that.
Yeah, no, it's spot on. The next principle, and I'll try to zoom through these pretty quick so this doesn't take an hour and a half, is consistency. So we are near obsessed as human beings with being and appearing consistent in our words and actions. So a good example of this, and a lot of times agents think this is really desperate, in the remarks, the agent remarks, they'll say, bring all offers, or willing to accept all offers, because something happens psychologically to you when you put pen to paper and you sign your name to a contract. You are now invested in this purchase. So sometimes they're lowballing you, but because they've already gone through the pain of signing all of these documents, the agent psychologically is just trying to get you to state your name saying, I love this, I want this. A good example is Maker's Marks. Maker's Mark, the whiskey or bourbon, they have their brand ambassadors. So if you go on their website, you can sign up, you do a signature to say like, I am a brand ambassador for this, I love this. And psychologically, because you've just staked your name to something, you feel obligated to continue that as a consistent individual. So a lot of agents are shy about getting reviews because they feel like, oh, it's pushy or it's salesy. But you don't realize that when your client takes the time to leave that review, they're putting something in writing that they've had to think of, and they want to remain consistent with that also, saying like, I've already said that I feel this way about this person. I want to remain consistent with it.
Yeah, I really like that. That's a cool parallel that you're making between getting the reviews to get those brand ambassadors, and then kind of the psychology behind when someone takes ownership of your business a little bit by endorsing it, they're going to be way more likely to actually endorse it when the opportunity presents itself. I love that. I mean, that's a great point and a great key takeaway in this book.
Yeah, and I think I could probably do a better job with my business by maybe recycling some of my old reviews and just like review spotlight, maybe have it show up in your Facebook memories and just say 1 year ago, thanks again, Dennis, for this review. And they're like, oh yeah, I forgot I'm a brand ambassador for Dustin Fox's real estate.
Yeah, and that's kind of a cool thing to do just in general, because I know there's a lot of people out there that talk in terms of, touching bases. There's an excuse to touch base with a past client on the anniversary of their home sale. And you can do that also through social media, like you just said, by sharing their review again. Being like, hey, I don't know if you remember this, but here's the experience you had, and congratulations again, you've been there a year, 2 years, 3 years. So you're just repurposing this content to your advantage, which is huge.
Yeah, and the next principle is social proof. So it basically says, when uncertain, we look for social proof examples. And a really good example of this is I don't think we knew that each of us were at the same Tony Robbins and Gary Vee event that day, but it was like every single one of those presenters had read this influence book and used every single tactic on them. So most of these events, they're there and they're giving you kind of their little pitch, and then they're asking you to buy something in the end. And there was an investor guy there that used social proof so ingeniously that, I mean, I didn't pay for it, because now that I'm aware of the social proof principle, I don't fall for it often. But what he did is he went through his whole pitch, like, how many of you guys, he did everything, like, like you see in an infomercial. I'm going to give you all of these things, and what if I told you for just today, it was going to be $500? Like, and this would probably impact your business. You could make $100,000 off of this $500 you spend if you put the work in. How many people here, raise your hands, think that's a good deal? Like, maybe like half of them raise their hands. And then, of course they do like any other infomercial, they drop the price. Well, how about if I told you for 1 day only, just today? And then they start stacking the premiums, and they say, how many would say, if I could do this for $200, would you be willing to do it? Raise your hands. And this is where the social proof came in. People raise their hands, and he says, okay, everybody that's raised their hands, stand up. And they already had their hands raised, so they felt like obligated socially to stand up. And they said, turn around and look at each other, and then come up to the table up front here and fill your name and credit card information out. And I watched everybody walk up like lemons, like everyone. And it was super impactful for me, because I'm like, this is like a perfect example of the social proof in action. And some of the ways that you can use that as a real estate agent, for your own business, is in your marketing, your sales letters, your postcards. You want to say things like, or if you're suggesting something, say you have a price that's a little bit low, and you're giving them options, and you say like, no risk, accepting the offer as written. Medium risk is countering, maybe splitting the difference. And then, high risk would just be rejecting the offer. And say, many sellers, or most sellers such as yourself, normally do this option.
Right.
And they want to be associated with what most people are doing. Most people do. So it's just like a postcard, like #1 reviewed Centerville real estate agent or Springfield agent, whatever. They want to do what most people are doing. They don't want to go with the one-off agent. Sorry, I'm using my my notes here a little bit that I took. There's also another example of social proof, is the Werther effect. And a good example of this is when Robin Williams committed suicide. Suicide rates spiked across the country because of social proof, and somebody that's famous is doing something like this. And it took them years to figure out what this phenomenon was when suicide rates are going up. I guess that's kind of a dark example, but um,
it's an extreme example, but it just goes to show that it's there. I mean, psychologically, we're wired a certain way, and even though you had the wherewithal at that seminar to acknowledge and see what that person was doing when they were trying to sell that investment seminar, others like myself raised their hand, spent $900 to learn how to option trade, and lost more money option trading. So it works. Some of us are weak links. Some of us are a little bit more resolute in their decision making. But I'm not going to point any figures, and I'm not going to judge. I'm just not going to judge.
Well, it's important. Now you know of the principle, and you're going to be much more aware of when it's being used against you. And you see this on high dollar ticket items a lot. If you ever go online, like whatever anybody in real estate's trying to sell you, and they say, if interested, call this number. Know right then. If they're not making it easy to purchase, they're forcing you to have to talk to a salesman to stack all the premiums and go through the values, and then, we're going to lower this price for just today. These should all be red flags of scarcity, social proof. Most agents such as yourself will do this plan. You just have to be aware of these. The fifth principle is likability. So as a rule, we are usually more compliant towards people we like, and wily compliance professionals or salesmen know which factors make us like a person, such as physical attractiveness. It produces a so-called halo effect, meaning that we tend to see attractive people as smart, kind, and honest. Worryingly, we even tend to vote for more attractive candidates in political elections, and we're also suckers for flattery. So a listing presentation, and they're giving you the tour, like, oh, that's a nice tie. Like, blue is my favorite color too. And you're just like trying to find ways to make them like you. There's probably multiple ways that you can use this in your business.
Oh man, I hang my hat on being beautiful like all the time, dude. I think that's like maybe the cornerstone of my business. I'm kidding, but in reality, what's interesting is I kind of split test these listing videos that I did. They're kind of like HGTV style, walkthrough, make them fun, exciting. And I did one by myself, and I put it out there. It was same kind of area, same kind of price point, ran it, and the number of views I got was decent just because of the production quality. I took my wife and added her to one, and we kind of did this like husband-wife bicker back and forth type of thing. And, she was in it, and she 5 or 6 times, I don't even know what the term is, 5 or 6 time multiplier the amount of views and engagement we got on that video purely because she was in it, and she's hot. And that, it makes a big difference, feeling like you can visually connect with somebody. I mean, it seems kind of shallow, but in a lot of ways you have to kind of aesthetically present whatever that piece is in a way where people want to take advantage. And in that situation, the social proof is there. That's the engagement it got.
Yeah. And I think it's not just physical attractiveness, just your looks. It's also the way you dress, the way you carry yourself. Our brokerage specifically is big. Like, you don't need to wear a suit to be a professional, but you never know how somebody is sizing you up and being judged. On a boat.
I'm going to the Lonely Island concert tonight, so I had to wear my I'm on a boat shirt because we're gonna be checking that out tonight. Got that for Father's Day. Nice,
man. Nice. That'll be fun.
Yeah,
it'll be fun for sure. And then the last principle is authority. So people are more easily swayed by authority than they are by mere symbols of authority, but also just mere symbols of authority. That's why real estate agents get designations, luxury designations, short sale designations. Having those things stacked, gives you a sense of authority. That's why, I will put in my email signature, Washingtonian, 2018 top agent, Northern Virginia Magazine, 2019 top agent. If you are in a doctor's office and you see like top doctor Washingtonian, you're going to be like, I think I'm going to just agree with this guy because he's obviously authority. Right. So don't feel shy about signing up for these things when you have the opportunity for them and taking full advantage of what they provide for you. Every single one of those designations.
Yeah, in that situation, when I was 23 and got my broker's license, it was not because I had an ambition to want to run a brokerage. It was purely the fact I was 23 and I needed additional credentials so people could look past my youth and be able to take me seriously. And when I was like, hey, it's like 10% of the agents have their broker's license, and this is what it basically means. I could own and operate my own firm if I wanted to. It's irrelevant of the fact of levels of competency between brokers and agents, but to the public, the perception was it made me an authority, it made me an expert. So being able to leverage that was huge. So I'm a big believer in those type of credentials, especially if you can educate the consumer to the benefit of having them.
Yeah, and I think that's the big key is a lot of people, it's your Zig Ziglar shy salesmen have skinny kids. If you're going in there and you're not going to even take the time to point out why it's beneficial for them that you're a broker versus a regular agent, they're not going to know the difference. They don't know. They think everybody's a broker.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that is Influence. It'll be in the show notes, guys. It's a dense read, but take the time, take notes. And every time you read an example, you'll have an aha moment like, oh man, I could use that in my marketing for sure. You're up, Richard.
Dude, that was a good one, man. That was a juicy first one for sure. I got to tell you, this was probably one of the most challenging things I had to prepare for. Like, no one coming on the podcast, interviewing, just kind of like really showcasing and just asking people about their business. It comes fairly naturally, but having to pare down all of the educational materials over the years and the books that I've read and digested on my, my personal growth journey, dude, that was a near impossible feat to do. So I am going to stick with 3, but I'm probably going to give you some ones that, like you said, they go hand in hand if you're looking for kind of that first read and then progressionally continuing on that same type of topic. I did that. But what I did is I actually cast kind of a wide net. I wanted to showcase a book that was a little bit about mindset, motivation, and passion. I wanted to do one that was like on actual success business principles that the highly successful people use day in and day out. And then last but not least, to kind of touch on the consistency thing you were just mentioning in the past book, I've got a book that I think is really, really important to kind of showcase the subtleties between the ultra successful and those that are just kind of hobbyists, especially in our industry. So my very first book, which I'm going to do like this because I don't have a copy of it with me. I mostly do Audible books. I don't know, maybe we can like drop in the book right here. I don't know if you've got some editing tools. I'll do that for later. But it's Start With Why, as the title said, written by Simon Sinek. All right. And this book is not particularly just a real estate book. What it is it is a kind of a case study as to why certain businesses have these just like cult-like followings, right? And they use Apple, the company Apple, I'm sure we've all heard of it, the first $1 trillion company. They use Apple as kind of the case study in this, and how if you know people, you've probably met somebody who is an Apple person. Like they won't touch another technology device other than an Apple product, and they will pay a ridiculous premium, like $1,000 for a monitor stand to be able to have that brand, to be able to be, so kind of that brand ambassador thing we were talking about before. But really the emphasis of this book is that these companies like your Apples, like your Googles, that have these just very, very distinguished and thought out purpose around their business model, they really sell their products using their why as opposed to what they do and how they do it. Right? So there's this concept in the book called the golden circle. And I would encourage you, and we'll drop it in the show notes. There's a YouTube video by Simon Sinek. It's a TED Talk, and he goes through the entire basically how most companies operate. And the golden circle is, think of a target. You have the outer ring, which is your what. You've got an inner ring, which is your how. And then you've got the small bullseye in the middle, which is your why. And the way most companies sell their products is to go, what do we do? Oh, we're a computer company. We're a tech company. We sell computers. Great. How do you do it? We use the most revolutionary tools and technology at our disposal with the most up-to-date computer software and hardware available, and we're cutting edge to basically bring you the best products. And then ultimately, why should I buy one, or why do you want to know one? Because we build a great we build a great computer and we put the best technology in it. That's why you buy it. And his argument is that's not a compelling argument. There are a million other tech companies out there that are selling the same product. As real estate agents, there are a million other real estate agents out there that offer the exact same what and how. The how process is basically the same. We use uniform contracts. We use, the same process. Getting pre-approved with subtle variations is basically the same. And what you do, everybody else does. You can show houses. You can write contracts. You can negotiate. It doesn't differ from agent to agent other than skill set and their approach to the process. But what does set you apart is your why. At the end of the day, why does your company exist, and why should people use you? And if you don't have a clearly defined answer to that, then why would anybody sign up to do business with you? So his whole philosophy is turn that golden circle, that target, and you work from the inside out. So when somebody says, what do? You start with your why. You talk about, well, what I do is I make dreams come true. I help partner people through an experience that I've refined over years and years and countless transactions to be able to have this momentous, life-changing experience that's incredibly fulfilling for both you and for me. And the experience is the priority for me. That's what I want. What I happen to do is sell real estate, and how I do it is by going through this process. But they start with their why, the most compelling piece. And I see so many real estate agents literally have no idea why they do what they do, what sets them apart from the competition. And if you watch his TED Talk, it's super empowering. Have you seen his TED Talk?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
And I'll definitely put that YouTube link in the show notes. But I completely agree. And I think if you're not able to do that in like a 30-second elevator pitch when somebody asks you why, another book, and I hate to segue it, is, what is it called? It's like the Ritz-Carlton book.
Yes.
And they have their credo. And, one of the very first things they say is like, our goal or our objective is to create memorable experiences for each of our guests. And that's something that every real estate agent could easily work into their pitch and saying like, I'm not only interested in giving you a memorable experience when you're buying or selling a home, but I want that memorable experience to last a lifetime.
Absolutely.
And you actually living up to that.
Yeah, there was a crazy at a conference, a crazy story that somebody used to kind of cement this same principle, like, the whole relationship, really focusing on the people, not the product and what you're selling, but focus how they actually interpret it and how they experience your product. And they use Ritz-Carlton, and they share this story, and I'm not going to do it super justice, but the guy, he has a podcast called Unmarketing, and he has a book called Unmarketing. I cannot remember his name off the top of my head. We'll post it in the comments, but he has a story where he shares he knew this client, and he went to the Ritz-Carlton, and his family was there, and they had this awesome experience. It was amazing. And the daughter, his like 6-year-old daughter, left her doll, like her doll, and I think it was like a bunny or something. And they flew home, and it was like in Canada, and they flew home to like, I don't know, somewhere in the United States. And they get home, and the daughter is just beside herself. So the guy calls the Ritz-Carlton, says, hey, is there any way you guys can get this? Did you find it? Can you ship it to us? And they were like, yeah, we'll take care of it. And like the general manager, instead of just packaging up the bear and sending it with the doll and sending it back, they basically took this doll and they just created experiences with the doll. Like it was helping make dinner one night with the chefs, and it was sitting poolside, and it had like a little towel on its head, and it was in brushing its teeth one night. And they sent all these photos and a video and then some Ritz-Carlton like memorabilia in a package, sending it back. And his daughter was just so blown away. She's like, oh my God, my dolly had the best time. Oh, I can't believe we missed it. And the parents are like crying that they did this, that they created this memory for their daughter. And I was like, listening to the story, and I was like, I'll only stay in Ritz-Carlton. And then I saw how expensive they were, and I was like, well, maybe later. But they got it down. They figured it out. They figured this part out, and they really stick to it.
Well, I mean, and that goes back back a little bit to what we were saying earlier about reciprocity. One of the things that we do is I'll have, if I'm in the dollar store or I'm at Walmart and I see something cute and new, I'll throw it in my open house bag. And if I have a connection with a family and the kids being fun, I'll sneak it and give it to them later on. And, the parents will say, oh my gosh, you didn't have to do that. That's so sweet. And you wouldn't believe, like, doing something for somebody's kid like that is more meaningful than actually doing it for the adult themselves.
Oh, for sure.
Nothing makes them happier than seeing their kids happy.
Yep. So kind of the next thing with this book, which I thought was a great point, is that people want to do business with companies that inspire them to take action, right? They want to become these brand ambassadors. They want to support the company because they want to feel a certain way, right? People make decisions by how they feel, not about how they actually think, right? We buy emotionally and then we justify logically. So we made that purchase, and then here's all the reasons why I made the person, but really you made that purchase because it made you feel a certain way. So in order to truly inspire people to take action, it requires a real purpose, right? I'm not going to inspire anybody to do anything if they don't really believe in me and what I'm trying to accomplish. But when they buy into me, as the salesperson, that's when they're going to feel inspired to reach out, to make the connection, and ultimately want to work together. And I thought that was a really key takeaway in this book as well. And then, kind of the last point in the book that I really liked, and this is something, my wife and I've struggled with for years, but my wife has kind of put in her own words, which I'll tell you in a minute. But basically, when you have such a clearly defined focus and why, then you can ignore the competition, because nobody in the competition is going to have your ability. Like, they're not going to be able to replicate you, right? That is your unique selling proposition, is you and your why. So having it clearly defined, you can go, that's all noise. Unless it fits within my core values, within my why, my mission statement, then it really is irrelevant. That's just noise in the background, and great, good for them. Like, be their champion and cheerleader. But at the end of the day, that's not you. That's not your lane. And a clear why, having a clearly defined why, is ultimately what separates you from the competition. And this is something I have struggled with. I don't know if you have, Dustin, but I have struggled with over the years. You see somebody that, you lost an opportunity, they worked with somebody else, and you're like, them? Kidding me? You kidding me? And then, you're taking it personally. And my wife had a really great saying. I don't know if she stole it from somewhere, but, she said, hey, Richard, when you're paying attention to all the other people and what's happening to them, and you're not paying attention to what you've got going on, you're driving with your eyes in everyone else's lane but your own. And I think we can all agree, when you're looking in someone else's lane and not paying attention to where you're going, bad things are going to happen. And that's always kind of the reminder that I'm trying to think about. And what this book, I think, is specifically speaking to, is take the time to center yourself and focus on your own why, because at the end of the day, that's really all that matters. You can only do better by being the best version of yourself.
I agree, brother. I agree. And going back to what you said about Apple, I mean, I buy Apple because the product works. It makes me feel smarter. And I love telling my friends that ruin a text group thread with their green iMessage. And I immediately judge them. I'm like, you're an idiot. Why are you using Android? Like, it works.
Get out of here with that ridiculous phone. So that's it. Start.
All right. So next is, and I know you know this book, Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. I think he's the late great Chet Holmes, I believe. Any listeners, by the way, for some reason, because I'm addicted to ordering books on Amazon, like, I don't think I'm actually spending any money. I have 2 copies of this book. So if anybody's listening to this, you leave me a review and then send me a text, I'll mail you my second copy of this book, because I'm sure that it's going to impact your business. So one of the first lessons that Chet Holmes says is, by educating rather than selling, you can attract the interest of a much larger audience and thus increase your success. So for example, when I'm doing like an expired or withdrawn letter, I know, or I assume, that most of the letters that they're getting are like, list with me, I'm the best agent, this is what the other people did bad, this is why I'm great. I take a different approach in a sequential letter, and it's more education based. Like, has nothing to do with what their previous agent did. I don't even mention them. I just say, educationally, what I would do to sell their house. Like, fact after fact, feature benefit, feature benefit, feature benefit.
Yep.
He also talks about maximizing sales by targeting decision makers. So this is big with people that have been able, and this is not honestly one of my strong suits, but people that have gotten in good with the mega investor clients. So they'll target them, they'll go in the tax record and see like their LLC name or their company name that's in the tax record, and they'll take their town first, and they'll say, okay, I'm looking for the guy that owns like 10 to 20 houses in Centerville or wherever you live. And then they're going to do above and beyond what anybody else is doing. Now, this would probably take you 2 to 3 weeks to do, 50 to 100 of these people. But if you did a binder with a really full CMA, action-packed items about, where the prices are going in that neighborhood, you put a little sticky note and saying, I hope this information is helpful. You can see a lot of your properties here have appreciated a lot since you bought them in 2010. If you're ready to make a move and use that money on another purchase or, whatever. So just targeting those big decision makers is a way that you can quickly grow your business. And then he talks about making your sales pitches more memorable by using compelling visuals and headlines. So I'm really big on this with headlines. He lists a lot of examples there. So like 6 secrets every Springfield seller should know. And making sure the best buyers who know who you are by persistently and personally communicating with them. You remember this from the book, The Dream 100. So as an activity, especially in the slow time, if the agents that are listening to this identified 100, what he calls the Dream 100, 100 expired or withdrawn listings or FSBOs that they said, I really want this listing. They understand that you're competing against 1 million phone calls, 1 million postcards. Everybody's getting their stuff. So how are you going to separate yourself from the competition? And he talks about this through sequential letters. So having the consistency in your work and the hard work ethic he talks about a letter every 2 weeks for basically 5 months. So 10 total letters. And at that point, if they've gotten 10 things from you, and they're not going to work with you, they have an existing relationship. But how much more impactful is it going to be than somebody sending you a single expired or withdrawn package versus you communicating with them 10 times over 5 months or until they're relisted? It's so impactful. And then he also talks about keeping your clients forever in order to increase your profits. So it's cost much less to keep a client than it is to obtain a client. You see agents that are spending $400 or $500 on a Zillow lead, and that lead probably has like at best a 10% chance of converting. Well, when you already have that client there, it's much less expensive for you to take good care of them than it is to purchase a new client. So like one of the things that we do here at our brokerage is Client Giant, and we set them up on a plan to where they get, 4 meaningful gifts a year. So, and it's just a lot more impactful if they're getting something in the mail versus you just sending an email, hey, checking in, or a phone call checking in. If they're getting a nice gift once a quarter, you're going to stay top of mind with those people.
Well, it's also like the law of reciprocity kicking in too. They're like, I got that gift. What we were just talking about, it's like, oh, shoot, man, I got to hook him up because he's going to stop sending me gifts real soon. And then it's like, okay, cool. They're there. They want to support the business, and it is helping you stay top of mind.
But yes, that is the Ultimate Sales Machine in a shorter nutshell. Obviously, there's a lot more takeaways than what I shared there. But that's looking back, my margins of my book, that was what was like the most impactful for me and how I took it, what I took.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on the Dream 100 because that's the thing that stood out to me. When I was managing my previous company, that's when I read the book and I created a list of my Dream 100 recruits, these agents that I wanted to recruit. And I was like, literally any one of those agents could have completely turned the profitability of my office. And so to be like, hey, if I'm going to target small, I'm going to miss small. If I can get 2 or 3% return on my investment over, systematically going after these 100 people. Well, that's like 3 agents, that have a crazy high production and could make all the difference in, being in the office, and then landing an agent like that, kind of what that does in the community and all that. So I love the Dream 100. It's kind of like, if you're gonna farm, let's say, and you're gonna just scatter, you're gonna buckshot it out to all these people, why not just target, the 100 that could be the biggest benefit to you, and really just be diligent with it? And I think that's what you did, Dustin. Like, you really were selective and targeted the ones you really wanted, and it made a huge difference in your business, I think.
Well, yeah, because I was never intimidated by the luxury space or trying to break into it. And I knew it was going to be really hard for me to do that. So I was specifically targeting those and getting my teeth kicked in on those listing presentations. But I knew if I just stuck with it long enough, I would learn from the losses and learn how to get my pitch better and go from there.
Right. Cool, man. Yeah, that was a good one. I like Chet Holmes and the Ultimate Sales Machine. That's a good, just all around sales instruction manual. Love that one. All right, so my second book, I think we can agree this is an old one, been around a long time, but absolutely as relevant as it is now as it was when it was written, and it is The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And it's awesome, man. What I love about this book is it's just interesting is, we were kind of going through and I was looking at like all of the notes. When I read a book, like I keep a note on my phone of like key takeaways. And it was real easy for this one because I went back and I literally remember making notes about the 7 habits. And if you've read the book, there's actually an 8th habit at the end. So I will pull back the curtain and give you the 7 habits. But I would obviously, the detail in which he goes into these habits and what makes a big difference for highly successful people is awesome. He gives a lot of anecdotes, a lot of stories. I'll share one of those with you. But the first one is being proactive. So kind of predicting the problem before it happens, anticipating what's going to take place in your space, right? So being like living under a rock is never a good place to be. You want to be proactive. You want to know what's happening, and you want to do things before they're requested of you. We've talked about this a number of times. I think people shy away with working with listings, right? We have a lot of less experienced, or maybe even the experienced agents that prefer working with buyers, because I think it's intimidating to work with sellers, because most of the time they're waiting for news like an offer to reach out to the seller. In reality, you should be proactively reaching out to the seller and predicting what they need before they need it, giving them that feedback, letting them know, like they should never be wondering, what are you doing to affect a sale on their home? They should be like, yeah, he's got it under control. I mean, I don't have anything to complain about because I know exactly what he or she is doing. So being proactive is definitely number 1. Number 2, which is my favorite of the habits, is start or begin with the end in mind. So many of us go, hey, oh my God, that agent over there is doing this amazing prospecting thing and they're getting all kinds of results and they're like, awesome, I want to start doing it. And there has been literally no thought given to, well, what does this mean? What is the end result I'm actually working towards, right? And then what you do is you have to figure out where you are, where you want to go, and then you can fill out the middle, right? The path and how you're going to get there. But without an end, dude, you are just running in circles. You have no idea which direction you're going in. So starting with the end in mind is so important. And that kind of falls back onto like, do you have written goals? Do you have a plan of action? Do you have an implementation strategy? Like those things are all very, very important. I think when you're making life decisions, whether it's personal, professional, with your health, spiritual, whatever they are, I think it's really important to make sure that you are keeping the end in mind. The third habit is to put first things first, right? So what does that mean? Putting first things first, that means having a healthy understanding of priorities, right? So I think a lot of real estate agents, at least a lot that I work with and have talked to, and I myself can attest to this as well, is quality of life can become an issue when you allow the business to be your only priority, right? Your family pays the price. There can be issues at home, and then ultimately issues at home are going to lead you to be not as successful as a real estate agent. So being equally balanced in the different areas of your life is critical. And in order to be equally balanced, you have to understand what are the priorities, and you really probably need to schedule them and write them down, right? What is the first thing? What is first thing to you? And then make sure that your time, like how you're spending your time, matches with the priorities that you're putting down and that you're committing to. So that's definitely a huge one. So those are the first 3 habits, and they have the book broken down. The first 3 habits are your independence, right? They're first, and they're independent to you. Then you have interdependent, right? So with other people in collaboration. And those are your next 4 habits. So habit 4 is think win-win, right? So when you are interacting with, whether it's a colleague, whether it is an employee, whether it is a client, doesn't matter. You want to be thinking in terms of what is the win-win here? How can I make this at the end of the day? How can I be compensated for what I'm doing? Give them such a pleasant experience that they become a raving fan, wanting to endorse my business. And at the end of the day, they look at this as a win, because so many of us look at it's like, hey, a negotiation's a win-lose. Really, it's not. It's a series of compromises that's going to get you ultimately to a win-win. Because if the buyer buys and that's the house they wanted, and the seller sells and they get what they're looking for, that's a win-win. So how do we get to a win-win? And of course, negotiations is a whole nother, there's a million books I could recommend on that. But just kind of thinking in terms of starting with, when working with others, how do we make this a win-win? And that's typically going to be the least rocky, least challenging, least impediment generating type of way of approaching your business, for sure. Number 5, which this one, super important. I think in a day and age where texting and emailing and lack of physical face-to-face or voice-to-voice conversation is becoming more the norm, I think that this is really important. And it is basically the art of listening. But the actual habit is seek first to understand, then to be understood. So really what he's summarizing is understand how to be an effective communicator. If you can't effectively communicate, you're not going to get anywhere, right? You're going to struggle in relationships, personally, professionally. You're going to struggle with your clients. We just kind of touched on that a minute ago with your sellers. You have to first understand where the person you're engaging in a conversation with is coming from before you can even understand how to respond. But so many of us, myself included, dude, let me go. I'm a loose cannon. My gums will be flapping faster than anything else. Like, you got to understand, seek first to understand, then to be understood, the art of listening. So I think that for the most part, it's fairly self-explanatory. But
if you go into like an Apple store, whenever you come in there with a problem, if you watch the associates, they're very trained in that kind of Socratic method. You'll be like, hey, my phone is frozen, and I'm not even able to access it. I've tried restarting it, nothing is working. And they're like, so let me just make sure we're on the same page here. What you're telling me is your phone is frozen. I'm like, yeah, man. Like, that's what I just said.
That's exactly what I'm telling you. What you just said is what I told you. So I'm glad we're on the same page. But it's important. It's important because I've had people tell me one thing, and like what they say is not actually what they mean. So you have to really be, you say something back, like, somebody gives you, like, say, a commission objection. Hey, I'm not comfortable paying that level of commission for what you're going to do. So if I hear you correctly, what I'm hearing you say is you don't think the commission that's being offered here is being, there's not enough clear benefit to you to pay that type of commission, right? Because if I go right after the objection, which is they don't want to pay that much, that may not actually be the underlying issue. The underlying issue may be like they don't think what they're getting, the services they're getting, are worth that level of expense. So then you're really, you're treating the actual issue, the real symptom, which is they don't see the value, and you have to then be able to show them the value. So that's really, really an important piece to all this as well. So number 6, which I lied to you a minute ago, I said the last 4 are interdependence. Sorry, these 3 are interdependence, and then there's one more. So number 6 is synergize, which is teamwork, collaborate, understanding the importance that no successful people get where they are in life without having a core group of people that they synergize with, that they work with on a regular basis, that help push and motivate and get them where they want to go. Dustin and I, we synergize on this podcast. We want to put together very valuable content. Together, we can do a lot more good, I think, than we could individually. So that's why we're doing. We're actually practicing this one, and you aren't on it. You don't have to be on an island. I also find what's interesting is, I have this coaching that I'm doing, and yesterday, one of our agents who is very, very successful, she just recently started her own coaching program. And the first thing I was like, let me reach out to her. I got to ask her if she's willing to let me pick her brain as a collaborator, because I want to know what she's doing and how we can complement each other, and if we can share ideas, and then basically just kind of work together to be better in our individual lanes on what we're trying to focus on and accomplish. And so I reached out, and this person who is super duper busy, like the last thing they want to do is have me just like jaw at them for an hour, hour and a half. And like, without even a second thought, absolutely, let's chat. When do you want to set it up? And she had me on her schedule the next day, which I was like, dude, that is crazy. But it just goes to show successfully minded people aren't letting the limiting beliefs that if they share something with somebody who could be perceived as a competitor, that they're going to somehow then end up without a job. Like, you're probably not going to put yourself out of a job. That kind of goes back to the last book and understanding your why. But the synergizing is so, so important, and really, really successful people understand this through and through. And the last one in the book, the set of the 7, continuous improvement, personal development. I'm a big, big believer in this, but the sharpen your saw, which is plan for continued growth. And the story they give in the book, and I think I actually might have shared this on a previous episode, was they had it was a story, it was an anecdote. I don't think it was a true story, but they had this tree chopping competition. And there was these 3 guys, and they went out there, and this one guy was the reigning champion, but he was definitely past his prime. He was elderly, and they go out and they get this huge, massive tree trunk, and they get an axe, and the first person to chop this tree down with just an axe wins the competition, right? So they go out there, there's several people there. There's like this new up and coming guy who's crushing it. He's got the state of the art axe. He's out there, and they're like, everybody's placing bets. This guy's got it, right? But then there's that old tried and true dude who's been the world champion for years and years and years. And he goes out there, and they shoot the gun, right? They all run out there and they start chopping, chop, chop, chop. And the guy out the gate with the new axe and the younger guy, much more energy, he's just like making all kinds of progress on this thing. He's going to town, head to head. He's beating this staple, this guy who's been around for a long time. After about 5 or 6 chops with his axe, the older gentleman stops, walks over to a stump, sits down, starts sharpening his axe. He sharpens the axe, he goes back over, starts again. But he's got to make up for lost time because these guys are way out in front. They're killing it. But as the competition goes on, they're chopping at this tree. The next thing you know, this guy who every 6 to 7 strokes goes back, sharpens his straw, he's catching up on him. He's gaining momentum. About the halfway point of the tree, they're about neck and neck. And these guys are fading. The ones that aren't taking the break, the ones that aren't over there, and they are sharpening their axe and their tools, they aren't able to keep up with this guy. And sure enough, he goes on to obliterate them, and they don't even get much more than halfway through the tree before he's finished and crowned the king again. And so he went up against these guys that arguably were much better equipped and physically more skilled than he was, but he knew the importance of keeping his skills and his tools sharp, skills being the metaphor for the axe. He kept those sharp and took the breaks. Like, he did the rest run cycle sufficiently enough to really make a huge impact there, and he ended up winning because it wasn't a sprint, it was a marathon. And that's how he paced himself, and that's how he won. He made it easier, not harder. So that's a big thing there. The last one of the 7, which was the sharpen the saw. So you've got to plan for continued growth. You have to continue to develop those skills. And then last but not least, number 8, which they give you as a nice little nugget at the very end. And I know this one was long-winded, but find your voice to inspire others to find theirs. Right? So by teaching what you learn, by giving and contributing, kind of what I just talked about a minute ago with the synergizing and the collaborating, that is the 8th habit of these very successful people. When they are in their twilight years, when they have done and accomplished everything that they were going to set out to be, and more than most people would plan or hope to accomplish in their lifetime, they turn around and they give back to others. They inspire them with what they did by sharing their story. And I think that's a really cool, big takeaway. And of course, Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, highly recommend it. Great book, great actionable book, and it just gives you the 8 habits that you need to really turn your life around.
I love it, man. I love the sharpen the saw. I mean, that's obviously why we're doing this and why we're reading all these books. I think there's limited beliefs and like a scarcity mindset with a lot of agents, like with discount brokers, or what if a crash happens, or what am I going to do with my business? But if you are continuously focusing on improving all aspects of your life and stacking skill sets, if something were to happen to our profession, Like they can't take away what you've put in between your 2 ears. Like that's going to be there forever, and you're going to figure it out after, like long term.
Like Ben Franklin says, an investment in yourself pays the highest return.
Yep.
Simple.